So, hey, welcome back to the Aerospace Executive Podcast. It's shortly after Christmas. This will be airing in early January. So happy 2025, and I'm really happy to have Mark Fava on with me. Mark's down in Charleston, South Carolina. He's a senior legal leader with Boeing, but more importantly, he just wrote this great book, which I just read, called "Lessons from the Admiral," and it's a really quick read. And I'm going to start to recommend it to all the young kids I mentor, because it brings up some really good points on how to deal with tough bosses, manage expectations, think ahead, take charge. And thanks for coming on, Mark. Thank you for the book, for one. It's great to have you on. I've appreciated the friendship over the years.
Thank you, Craig. It's great to be here. Happy New Year to you also.
Happy New Year. So, what compelled you to write this book? Let's talk about your background a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So like you, I was Navy. I was ROTC. Went to Chapel Hill, and by process of elimination, chose the P3 community. I'd been on ships and subs, and decided that probably the funnest thing to do was aviation, and did that, and just had a great time. My first tour in Jacksonville. Second tour, I had a JAG officer who was a mentor say, "Hey, Mark, why don't you think about coming up to Brunswick, be an Admiral's aide?" And I said, "I don't think so. I think I'm going to go to the replacement air group and be an instructor, stay here in Jacksonville." And he talked me into it, and it was a great job, Craig. And I learned very early on that great bosses can impact you for a lifetime, and that's really what led me to write the book. I do things today, some 30 or 40 years later, that I learned in that job from him and from doing that job. And I thought, boy, wouldn't this be neat to sort of put these down in writing finally, after them banging around in my head for so many years.
So, it's funny. You moved to Brunswick, Maine, and you became an Admiral's aide. And, most people don't understand. An Admiral's aide is it can be a very thankless job.
Yeah.
Your career was different than mine. I was the last person that would ever have been chosen to become an Admiral's aide. But it's a pretty prestigious, it's a prestigious role. But the most important thing is you get to learn. You're learning from essentially, it's the CEO.
Yeah.
The right-hand person of the CEO. So let's talk about some of the the experiences you had and the lessons you learned over the years.
Sure. You touched on some of them. Look, you said it. You are at the right hand of the boss from the time he or she gets up to the time he or she goes to bed. And your job is to make sure that everything that they do is executed flawlessly that day, both in terms of being punctual, making sure they understand what the issues are, who's who in the room, where are we going, what are they saying. Now, look, they're smart people. They know a lot of this anyway, but your job is to support them in their daily endeavors, and that's both personal and professional. So, I learned a lot of what you mentioned a little bit earlier, the importance of execution, the importance of timeliness, the importance of thinking ahead, which it's a huge one that I use even to this day. We were talking about our children before we started. We're both fortunate to have great kids. And, I'm always asking my kids to, okay, what are we doing next? Where are you going next? Why aren't, trying to think ahead? And that is, again, one of the traits that I picked up from the boss that transferred incredibly well to not only being a lawyer, but also to being a corporate lawyer. I got in the corporate world, and I once had a general counsel tell me, I made a mistake. It was a bad mistake. I missed a call. And finally, when he was chewing me out, I just said, look, I didn't see that coming. And he said, Mark, I pay you to see that coming. Don't ever tell me that again. And I was just like, gosh, I knew that. I knew that. That's why I was in position as an aide, and I dropped the ball. But it's just a great example of how those lessons have been with me forever.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the, what are the basics of business? It's when you go into business, and this is the thing that I think a lot of young people, either they've never been taught or they miss it, but it's learn how to anticipate problems.
Yeah.
You take charge when there's a problem, fix it.
Right.
Take charge and fix it. Don't wait you don't need to be told.
Yeah. Execute.
Execute, be organized, show up. I remember when it's really funny when I joined Gulfstream, my first day at Gulfstream, my first civilian job after the Navy, I was at the company 2 hours and I got yelled at and it was really funny. But the CEO who yelled at me is actually a really good friend.
Yep.
But I was just a delivery person. All I was supposed to do was deliver a presentation to him for review, introduce myself, and leave.
Right.
The presentation was wrong. It had a lot of inaccurate information on it.
Yeah.
It taught me anytime. The one thing it taught me was anytime I went to his office with anything, no matter what, double, triple check it and just say, hey, is this right?
Yep.
CEOs don't have time. Yeah, they trust you to bring them correct information. They don't have time to double check your work.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's one of the chapters, in the book, I always had the same job, right? Same job, preparing the admiral's speech is make sure that if we're going to a change command or a big ceremony, he's got the speech. It's edited down to the minute. He's editing it maybe in the car, sometimes by paper. And then he would hand me the speech while he was getting his sword on. 10, 15 minutes after the change command, I'd run down to the admin room, make a copy of it, actually make 2 copies of it, run back, give him a copy, get another copy down on the podium. So we had 3 copies. He had the copy. We had one on the podium in case anybody messed with it. I had a backup copy, and I never will forget it. Just like you said, he was, a third of the way through the speech one time, and I knew every word because I'd helped him write it, and I'd read it, and I had timed it before he got up there. And he goes off script, and I'm thinking, oh gosh, something's wrong. He rarely does this. And then, from the audience, I'm sitting about 2 rows back because you always want to have an eye on the admiral. And he sort of glares at me in the audience, and I'm like, going, okay, this is interesting. So after the speech, it was over. The change command ceremony was over. I go up to him because I always run up. I get his gloves, I get his sword. People are congratulating him, saying it was a great speech. And he as he always did, he leaned over to me and whispered. He said, "Hey, how did it go?" And I said, "Well, Admiral, it was pretty good, but a couple minutes into it, you went off track a little bit, but you recovered very well." Because he always wanted to know the truth, which is another great thing about him. He said, "Tell me what I need to know, not what I want to hear." Uh, and he looked down at me. He said, "It was missing page 12. Don't ever let that happen again." And I hadn't page checked it. So I'd given him a copy that had run through the copy machine back in the old days. And for whatever reason, a couple of the pages had got stuck together. And you can imagine his horror as he's up there flipping from page 11. The next page in the big font he sees is 13, and that's when he glared at me. And just like you delivered to your CEO, it never happened again, ever.
Tell me what I need to hear, not what I want to know.
Yeah.
People struggle tell me what I need to hear, not what I want to hear.
Yeah.
That's a big thing that's a lot of people struggle with that.
It's very difficult, and it carries on. And again, it carried on as a lawyer. The most difficult thing as a lawyer at a law firm is looking a client in the face who's paying you and who wants to win and telling them you don't have a case or your case is no good or here are the flaws in your case. Fast forward again from the admiral to a senior partner. He told me the same thing. He said, "Mark, there's 50 other lawyers down the street that'll take this guy's money and tell him all day that he's right." He says, "But we don't get paid to do that. We get paid to have the hard conversations." And then you take that to the corporation. Usually, when you're sitting around a room as the legal counsel, you're probably the only person who has complete free license to deliver an opinion. Without any impunity. And I don't want to say that there's going to be any retribution because there's a lot of free will, but you're right. It is difficult to go against what the boss says when the boss says, "What do you think? Isn't that a great idea?" Who wants to raise their hand and say, "I think that's stupid," And so, a lawyer typically can say in a diplomatic way, "Here's some things that I think we ought to be thinking about," right?
Yeah, well, that's the funny thing is that, there's ways to say that's a dumb idea.
Exactly.
Back in our youth, you'd really go, "This is really," you throw an F-bomb in there with stupid.
Right.
Then you get a little older, and then you realize why you don't have any friends. And then you get a little older, and you say,
Yeah.
"I hear what you're saying, but
Right.
I'm not so sure that's a great idea." And here's why.
Exactly. Yeah.
You learn to be a little bit more diplomatic and get some emotional intelligence in there too.
Yeah. And it's funny because you'll walk out of that conference room and, half the people come up to you and say, that's exactly what I was thinking, so glad you said it, and, and then usually the boss, they appreciate it. And that was the same thing with the admiral. He said, I want you to be my conscience. Don't ever let me do anything stupid. And if you see me doing anything stupid, I remember him saying this. He says, you come into my office, I take off the stars, you take off the bars, and we talk, man to man, person to person. And he allowed me to do that. And a couple times he would course correct based on what I said. I just don't think we ought to be doing that. It might not be wrong. It just doesn't look right, right? The perception just did not look well during the time. And it got even, more hypersensitive as the years went on.
Yeah, look, but that there's some, there's a lot of leaders out there. It's,
Yeah.
and this is part of being a leader. It's being able to take learning the ability to go, hey, maybe I need to listen to people who, have my back.
Right.
You know, there's a lot of so-called leaders out there that they're right, you're wrong. I don't want to hear it. And part of developing as a leader is understanding that the voices in the room are there to keep you out of trouble.
Yeah. No doubt about it.
It's an interesting concept. You see who's doing well and who's doing poorly by their ability to listen.
Yeah. And a good Baptist preacher friend once say, we're always one dumb decision away from really blowing it. Right. And when you get ready to make that decision, you hope that there's somebody there that's going to grab you by the shoulder and say, hey, wait, well, you don't want to do this. Right. Those are your real friends. Or say, maybe we ought to do it this way rather than that way.
But the one thing about the book is that I found really interesting is, it's a lot of mentorship in there too.
Yeah.
You're learning a lot. You've got, you're the junior person in the room. You've got a big role, but you're the junior person and more. And I was chatting with my daughter about this last night. Wisdom and experience come with being there.
Yeah.
Did you find that the mentorship really helped you, and how are you using that experience to mentor the younger kids at, the younger executives, at Boeing and Delta? Some of
Yeah,
the other places you've
absolutely.
been.
No, sure. I learned that I think that a good boss is also a good mentor. And I think as you mature and you go from watching and following a good boss to being a boss, that becomes part of your role and responsibility, right? If you're not invested in your people, and you're doing everything you can, and I think I say this, surround yourself with good people, give them a lot of responsibility, hold them accountable, but then give them all the credit, and that's what the admiral would always do. And then if they falter or if they make a mistake, give them the ability to rebound and to recover. Uh, and I think that's incredibly important. And I've tried to carry that mentorship through law firms and through the corporate world. Even in my current position, almost everybody, I think everybody to a T that's reported to me over the last 14 years at my current employer, every one of them have moved on to a position of greater significance, been promoted. And, that's one, a large part due to their effort, but two, I would like to think is due to my coaching them and boosting them up. And then when people talk about them, I say, absolutely, they're doing a great job. And I think that's an important part of mentorship. And, I learned that from the Admiral. And then the next job I had right out of law school, when I went back to law school and came back, it's the same thing. I worked as a law clerk for a federal judge, exact type of role, right? Going in the courtroom every day, working for a judge who happened to be a former Navy enlisted yeoman who had come back to Charleston, gone to law school, got put on the federal bench. Same concept. And to this day, that judge who is still on the bench is still a mentor of mine. Matter of fact, when you look at the back of the book, everybody that gave me a blurb, almost everybody except for one. Well, one was a business acquaintance, but all the others have been mentors of mine. That to this day, I called up, I shared the book with them. They not only read it, but they endorsed it. And I hope to be in the position to continue to do that with other people, in my life.
Yeah, in corporate America, God, my clients are not really big companies. Boeing is not a client of mine, and Raytheon. I work with more smaller companies. But the one thing that I've worked in big companies, and the one thing that leaders should be judged on is not days on the road, which I know a lot of companies do, or sales or whatever, but how many of their people are getting promoted? How many of the
Yeah.
people in their command, under their leadership or in their division are getting promoted? And are they allowing them to do so?
Right.
Or are they whole, it's one of those things. If 10, 15% of your people aren't getting promoted every year to bigger roles, there's a leadership issue.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like in the court, and the same thing as in the corporation. For me, if I can delegate a task and my person can be entrusted to go brief the CEO or brief the vice president, it's great, right? Because it allows me to get them in front of somebody else. It allows less work for me because then I become a manager overseeing things as opposed to the person that always has to be there. But you're exactly right. There are a lot of people that are reluctant to do that. Well, they'll shut their employees out. I got this. You do the work. You deliver the memo to me. I take your memo and I deliver the message, and you're not even in the room. And I'm not even going to give you credit for it. I mean, if I do that, I at least acknowledge, hey, this memo was prepared by Jack, or I do that in an email if that person, isn't invited into the room. And I think that's such a poor way to try to lead, just to monopolize the face time at the exclusion of your employees.
Stay in your lane is not, stay in your lane is not really a good piece of advice
Right.
to
Right.
give people.
Yeah.
Look, there's a little bit of stay in your lane, but on the flip side, I'd rather throttle somebody back a little bit than have to light a fire under the butt to get
Yeah.
them going.
I agree. I tell people, look, you keep operating, and unless I tell you otherwise, yeah, you keep running, and unless I tell you otherwise, you're doing just fine. I'll call you and I'll tell you when I think you're getting outside or I'll be in check. And just one, keep me informed of what you're doing. Copy me on your email so I can cover you, and so I can also understand what you're doing, right? Because I don't want to be caught blindsided. And if you don't do that, again, that gets back to the accountability portion. I'm not saying everybody deserves to be promoted, but I am saying if you have people that are struggling to be promoted, you got to help them figure out, where are their strengths and weaknesses. I remember having this discussion. You and I have had these discussions quite a lot with COs. And when I was a CO of the P3 squadron, I had one of my department heads who just wasn't cutting it, and he was going to be, 5 of 5. And I had told him multiple times, you're being outperformed, and he didn't like it. Well, he finally saw it on, in the annual debrief of the fitness report. And I never will forget this. He's looking at me in the eye. He's, grown man crying in my office. And he's saying, you pretty much killed my career, and I'll never make '05. And I said, no, I said, you've done this to your career. It's your performance. I'm just telling you honestly where you are. And you got to change. You got to amp it up. And you know what, Craig, I left, and, 3, 4 years later, he made '05. Um,
Mhm.
and I saw him, and he said, but for that conversation, he goes, I probably wouldn't have made it. Because I went home and I remember him saying, what am I going to tell my wife? I said, you're going to tell her the truth. You're going to tell her you're not, you're not cutting it, and you're going to have to work a little bit harder. Um, and those hard conversations, I think, also can be very beneficial to people, because people have had them with me.
It's always the hard conversations that are the ones that need to be had, to be
Yeah.
honest with you.
Yeah. Very tough.
It's, yeah, but that's part of being a leader too. I mean, you have the hard conversations with people, and you don't necessarily have to hit them over the head with a bat. But to say, hey, look, you know, this is where you're at and why,
Yeah.
and be honest is, it's a hard conversation. Nobody wants to have it. It's kind of like you're fired too. Nobody wants to have that conversation.
Right.
But look, you got for their benefit and for yours as well.
Agreed.
Those are the ones that happen.
Yeah.
Um, and everybody shies away from 'em, which is a shit. That's a shame.
Yeah. They're no fun, but they have to be had, and there can be the most beneficial conversations you have. It's easy telling number one or number two, you're the greatest, right? And thanks for your hard work. It's very difficult telling number 4 and 5, at least when we're in the Navy, their performance is subpar and they got to step it up. But again, that can be the motivator, right? It can change somebody's life, and then they understand the choice is theirs, right? It's just theirs from theirs going forward,
But it's redemption too. You give somebody
right?
the ability, this is in business when you have to give, mistakes happen. People being people get distracted for whatever reason, family issues or, whatever, people are people. They're going to get distracted. And good leadership is bringing them back into the fold and giving them the opportunity for redemption.
Right.
And, or, candidly just say, hey, look, you're better off in a different organization. Maybe you just don't fit here.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and I talk about that in the book. I knew when I went to work for the Admiral that he had fired his first aide, and that's all I'd heard. They said, well, you better be careful because he'd fired his first aide, and I never knew why. And then finally, after about 6 months when I realized I was going to make it because you're being tested every single day, I think we'd had a long day and he told me the story why. But the key was the redemption came in the fact that he talked to him and he said, look, he says, you're not having a good time, are you? And the aide said, no, sir, I'm not. He goes, neither am I, right? I'm not having a good time. He goes, I don't think you're cut out for this job. Now, that doesn't mean he was a bad officer or a bad person. He just wasn't cut out for this job. And he goes, where would you like to go? And he said, I would like, I'd like this position in this squadron, do this or do that. And the Admiral got him a set of orders there and wrote paper on him that made it look like not that he was an aide, but that he'd just done a 6-month temporary tour of duty, with the Admiral. Now, look, you and I clearly know that could have been a whole different fitness report, right? It could have been a below standard. He could have shot him in the chest, and that guy's career would have been over. And I heard he went on to be an incredible officer. He just wasn't cut out for that job, and that's okay.
This is my big criticism about the military right now. And I've got many of them, but this is my big one is you have people that rise to command and they take command of squadrons and they take command of ships and they take command of whatever they take command of. And one mistake happens and they become front page news.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, maybe it was just the right person in the wrong job, happens. Maybe it was for whatever. And, I think you got to acknowledge, hey, this person made it to this point. They took the responsibility. They took the role, give them the benefit of the doubt, failure to be, losing confidence in their ability to lead and then putting all over stars and stripes does you no good and it does them no good either. Sometimes you just get great people
Right.
in the wrong positions.
Yeah, yeah. There's been a lot of them this year. So and there's probably going to be some more forthcoming. It's just been. I'm with you. I think you've got to understand that people are going to fail and give them I love that word redemption. Give them the opportunity to succeed in spite of failure, especially after an illustrious career. If it's not an egregious, intentional, flagrant violation of the rules, right? Just a mistake, because we're all going to make them.
We all make them. They happen.
Yeah.
And you get complex organizations and you get, like I said, people are, they get distracted. They get, they're whatever. Mistakes happen.
Right.
Leaders figure out how to work through the mistakes and ensure that they don't happen again. And they move on. It's, to keep bringing up, you made that mistake. I mean, look, if there's a pattern, there's a pattern, address it.
Right.
It is what it is. How did you take, so, here's an interesting thing. You had a great career going to the Navy. What was your decision to leave it? I mean, I think that a lot of people out there, they get comfortable. They get, they don't know whether to stay or go. An opportunity comes knocking. What made you decide to move on? And obviously you've had a great career since.
Yeah. I think the second to last chapter of the book, I talk about the anguish I went through, because you're right. That job was a prima donna job back in the day. If you said you were quote unquote getting out of the Navy in that job, most admirals fired you. They just that, you're not going to, you're not going to continue. They're not going to be my aide. But it was the end of the Cold War. We'd had a great time chasing Soviet submarines all over the world, the P-3, and the mission was starting to change a little bit, Craig. You remember these times. We were starting to do more counter-narcotics stuff. We were starting to do some overland surveillance, which was fun. But I really gotten bitten by the law school bug. I was a legal officer in the squadron, the same guy that was my mentor that appears in the book, who went on to be a Navy JAG Admiral himself, and had recruited me to come work for the admiral. I started to talk to him about law school, and he said, go for it. If you want to do it, go for it. So the opportunity to go to law school at that time, there was only one in the state of South Carolina. Come back home to Charleston, my home, and then what was the best decision I ever made was continuing in the reserves. So, I was able to do P3 stuff and still do aviation stuff, still ultimately command a P3 squadron, and do all that by becoming an aviation. At the same time, I was becoming an aviation lawyer was critical to my success, and just a lot of fun, and the ability to go jump in and do the Navy stuff on a weekend or for 2 weeks or sometimes 3 or 4 weeks. When I was a CO, it was almost every weekend, and you're always working. And I think that's what really led to my decision: the ability to come home to have a law career, but at the same time to still have my foot in the water in wearing the uniform and hanging out with some incredible Americans.
Yeah, the thing is though is that, and I deal with this a lot. You made the decision to go. The decision was supported. They asked, "Hey, is there anything we can do to change your
Yeah,
mind?" No. And they're like, "Hey, look, we'll support you on your way out the door."
yeah,
Um, I find it really funny, and I get people they're out looking for a new role. They find the one they want. They tell their company where I'm out, and then they take a counteroffer from the company
yeah,
to stay around. Oh, we'll give you that $10,000 you want to stay around.
yeah.
And you ultimately understand, but that's short-term thinking.
Great. And I went through the same decision process two more times, right? So actually maybe three. So I come back to Charleston with a great law firm, can't break into aviation. Buddy of mine asked me, "Hey, why don't you come?" Naval Academy grad, best friend from high school, calls me up and says, "Why don't you come work for Delta in Atlanta?" Had no desire to go to Atlanta at the time. Was again, my goal was to come back to Charleston, start my family at home, and talked to my wife, and we went. But 3 years later, I made the decision that, okay, I thought I'd broken through aviation law enough. 41 days after I got there, 9/11 occurred. So you can only imagine how
Ooh.
hard we were working for that next couple of years. And then we came back to Charleston. And guess what? I went back to the exact same law firm. I called them up and said, "Hey, do you remember me?" And they said, "Yeah." And I said, "I'd love to come back." And this is the, don't burn the bridges rule. I left them very diplomatically, and they said, "Sure, love to have you back, but we have no work for you. You got to build your own practice." And I said, "I'll do it. I'm hungry enough. I want to be there. It's a challenge. I'll do it." And then, 6 or 7 years later, when Boeing came into town, I did the same thing. Like you, I said, "Okay, I'm going to leave the firm." I got a job at Boeing, and there was once I made the decision, I knew that on each of those times that there was not going to be any counteroffer. There wasn't going to be any, "Hey, can we convince you to stay?" The decision had been made. My mind was made up, and I was going to try to exit as politely and as diplomatically and as graciously as I could, because relationships matter, right? They matter. The relationships I made in the Navy to this day matter. The ones I met at Delta. You know this, Craig. I mean, people in the aviation industry stay in the aviation industry. Heck, the CEO of JetBlue right now, Joanna Garrity, was a lawyer at JetBlue when I was a lawyer at Delta. So, it's a close knit family. And the same is true with your reputation in the legal profession.
Yeah, no, look, the the gesture out the door,
Yeah.
never be very careful.
Yes.
Be very careful.
I
30 years after I started, well, 29 years after I started with Gulfstream, I still run into people that I worked with at Gulfstream. And shockingly, they're my clients.
yeah.
And I say that sarcastically. Yeah. Why are they my clients? Because we have a good relationship.
Right.
It's never burn a bridge. Never burn a bridge. Uh, Yeah. Thank them for the opportunity, move on, never burn a bridge.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. Thank him for the opportunity. And to this day, I would not be where I am today without the opportunities that I was given both at Delta and at the law firm I was at here in Charleston, who were just phenomenal for me, right? And even when I disagreed with the management principles and the management philosophies, the concept is the one that we learned in the Navy, which is true in the corporate world. Disagree behind closed doors, right? And then air your grievances. And then when the decision is made by either you or the decision maker, you walk out of the room and you support the decision, right? And you don't gripe about it, and you don't leave 3 years later and post something nasty on Facebook or LinkedIn. I mean, it's just, I'm with you. I don't understand what is to be gained by doing any of that, because it will come back to haunt you.
See, I like that though, how you wrote about that. Support the decision. And
Yeah.
it's, yeah, look, we'll talk about it, we'll disagree about it, we'll throw things back and forth, but the person who owns the responsibility has to have the authority to make the call.
Right.
And you support that call.
Right.
You don't undermine it. You just, you know, you go for it.
Yeah.
And that makes things a little bit easier for your life and for the business life as well.
Yeah, once people know that that's what you're going to do every time, they won't come up and complain to you or question. It's like, look, he's pretty firm in that allegiance to the decision. And again, you might not agree with it 100%, but if it's not your decision and it's being made by somebody above you, it's your job to execute it, right?
You never undermine your boss. I
Absolutely
mean,
not.
be it the military or the business world, never undermine your boss. It doesn't end well. And people think that, yeah, hey, look, if I show them I'm better, or it's not the right way to play the game.
No, and I've learned as much from good bosses as I have from bad bosses, or I guess I should say that the other way around, right? We learn from the bad bosses who we don't want to be and how we don't want to act. And some of those I've worked for 2 or 3 years. And my goal has just been, look, you know what? I'm going to do this. I'm going to outlive outlast. I'm going to do the best I can to provide them the best service I can. I don't have to be their best friend, but as long as they are my boss, I will respect the position. And that's difficult. I think we learned that in the military, but it can be very challenging. And if you don't like it, then move on.
Go
Find
somewhere
some
else, right? I mean,
exactly. Make
it's a
make a
big
choice.
it's a big ocean, and
Yeah.
you have two choices. You can make it work and support the organization and the decisions that the organization's making, or you move on.
Right.
And yeah, that's it's a very it's not a difficult concept
No.
to yeah, to understand, but yeah, sometimes you gotta drill that into people. It's okay to
Yeah.
say this is not for me.
Yeah, I mean, and no one likes a complainer. And I've been the complainer, right? I was at the law firm and so I came back, I'm building this aviation law practice. I love what the firm's giving to me and providing to me, except it was an open firm. Everybody sees everybody's numbers. You see the billable hour numbers, you see the collection goals, you see the revenue generated. And then you also see everybody's compensation. So, after a while, I started getting frustrated. And I remember going to the managing partner, just, talking about this isn't fair. And, the compensation is skewed and I should be paying, me, I should be paying more, made more. And I'm comparing myself to this person. And great guy, he looks me in the eye and he says, Mark, he says, if every day you wake up and you look yourself in the mirror and you're mad and you're pissed off about coming to work here because you don't think you're being compensated well enough, you need to go somewhere else. And it wasn't, Mark, we're going to listen to you. We're going to pay you more. We're going to adjust our pay structure to make sure we take care of you because we have 300 other partners we're trying to work with. And you might be having a good year this year, but guess what? You've got to have a nice run rate for 2 or 3 years. Again, that was a cold slap in the face, but one that I needed. And he was right, either put up or shut up. And then he just said, don't come in my office again anymore complaining about your compensation. I was like, wow, okay. And then he said, if you got a beef, go to Columbia, South Carolina and talk to the head partner of the firm. So, back then I was big old proud Mark. I had a couple multi-million-dollar business. I drove up to Columbia, South Carolina, had lunch with the managing partner of the firm. And guess what? He told me the same thing. And again, they were right. They were right. They were managing the firm the best they could. And, it was time to put up or shut up and make a decision. And
Yeah, I
some
mean, a couple.
Some people never do that, Craig. Some people stay there and be miserable for the rest of their lives and then tell me, oh, you're so lucky. I said, no, I made a decision, you know?
Well, it comes down to, if I'm not getting what I want or what I need in life, it's my decision to change it. It's my responsibility to change it.
Yeah.
And when you realize in life that, hey, look, this is a dead end job, or my cubicle is, my cubicle is getting awful small. Well, if you want a corner office, change change your neighborhood.
Right.
Do what you need to do to succeed in life, because nobody else is going to do it for you. And I think that's kind of what I liked in your book. It's a lot of lessons on supporting people, taking charge, being a leader, understanding the situation, thinking ahead, anticipating problems. And if you do all that, things tend to work out pretty well.
They do. They do. And you take ownership, right?
So you're the top of Amazon now, right?
Yeah, I made it's wonderful. I made bestseller new release before the book has even been released, and I'm just so grateful and appreciative of most of it is shipmates, lawyer again, colleagues that I've met along the way that are just coming out of the woodwork and saying, "Hey, we just bought your book," and just so appreciative of that. So it releases probably right before we'll air this episode, but it will have been released on January 28th. And right now I've got close to 250 Amazon pre-orders, which most people when they write a nonfiction book barely sell 100. So
There you go.
I'm elated, and it's just it's been a lot of hard work. It's not all luck. It has been my project for 2 years, and every waking moment for the last couple of months I've been working on it, and I'm just tickled pink with where it sits right now.
That's great. Look, it's a good book for lessons from the Admiral. It's a quick read. It's a fun read. Just a lot of stories, which candidly I think is great. Just people learn by stories.
Yeah.
But it's a good book if you're a leader in a business or a leader anywhere. It's a great book to go get and hand to the people in your organization who are a little bit more junior, who are a little bit trying to figure their way out in life, the college kids coming up in the world, because it's some stuff that, hey, look, it's, take charge, anticipate problems, figure things out.
Yeah.
Understanding you do have power.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was trying to deliver, right? The audiences really are twofold. One, my and your generation, who can look at this and say, yeah, this resonates with me. And if I had to sit down with somebody that was a new check-in, these are the 10 or 15 things I would tell them that would be, if they do, as the Admiral told me, you do these things and we're gonna be just fine. And the biggest compliment I have is when people like you have gotten it, and I even got it in the hands of a 3-star. And this Admiral told me, I'm sending this to my son, who's a young Marine. That's great. She says, I enjoyed it, but my son, who's a young Marine on his first deployment, is the one that needs to read this. That's awesome.
It's great. Perfect. So people can find the book on Amazon.
Yes, sir.
And it's called Lessons from the Admiral, Naval Wisdom and Stories for Leaders by Mark Fava. Mark, thanks for coming on today.
Thank you. It's been a lot of fun. Really enjoyed talking with you.
Great conversation. Thanks for the book, and you'll do great with it. So best of luck in 2025.
Appreciate it. Thanks so much.